Hey there and welcome to the Code Wrinkles channel. In this video, I will show you how you can turn code like this into code like this one. And we'll obviously talking about MediatR request handlers that can turn out to become very ugly in our day-to-day applications. Probably you will ask for the source code of the project, so please note that all the Code Wrinkles ambassador members gain access to the source code a few hours after the video is published. So if you want to get the source code, make sure to join these Code Wrinkles as an ambassador member and you will automatically get access to the source code on the membership tab of the channel once you're done. Now let's get directly into it. I have this before set up and I have set up really a very simple skeleton application, but with everything that it actually needs in order to showcase the potential problems that we might have. And I will start by just using this register user command. Obviously here I have a command with the first name, last name, email address and password, and then I have this register user handler. Now if we take a look at this handler, and I would really kindly ask you to imagine that you are brand new on this project and you are looking at this code for the very first time, and I would ask you, what does this request handler do? So it will take you probably a few minutes, but you will go through it line by line and try to understand what happens on each of these lines. And to have just a comparison, let's go right now to this after project, and here we have the exact same request handler. It does exactly the same things, yet here we have everything in only 11 lines of code compared to more than 50 lines of code that we had previously. So I would ask you, if you are new on this project, which of these handlers would you understand what it does faster? Because for me at least, I think if I look on a handler and see something like this, then it's actually clear in a few seconds what actually is intended here. So first I want to create an identity, then I want to create a user profile, and then I just publish some notification that user profile was created, and then we return user profile. So that's basically it. That's actually the business logic that we want to implement in the handler. Everything else that we have here is actually more or less a cross-cutting concern. So if you ask yourself, how did I refactor this code? I will show you line by line or section by section. So first of all, let's take a look at this one. So this here is this part where we create a new stopwatch and we do some logging because we want to log as an information how long it took us to process the request. And obviously a little bit more down the line, we stop the stopwatch and we have then this log information that logs the desired information. So this cross-cutting concern, this is not, or this does not belong to the business logic, to the application logic itself, but it's still here. So the first thing that I wanted to do is I have moved away this logging. And for that, if we go here to this behaviors folder, I have created a bunch of different pipeline behaviors. And for the logging part, I have created this logging behavior, which does exactly the same thing. Like the code is copy pasted from the handler that we had in the before, and it does exactly the same. So we start a stopwatch, we log the information, then we await the next, and then we log how long it took for us to complete the request. So it's pretty straightforward, but by just simply implementing this logging pipeline behavior, we have basically removed all this code and all this code here. So already we have cleaned up our method or our request handler a bit. And then if we go to the next section, what do we do here? So here there is another, let's say, unit of code that does perform a certain action. In this case, I just want to look into the database and check if we already have a user or identity user with the same email, because we don't want this to happen. So this is what I would call a command validation. So what do we do with that? Well, I have also created a pipeline behavior in MediatR for register user validation behavior. And in this pipeline behavior, once again, we do exactly the same thing. By the way, in pipeline behavior, you can inject services and everything that you need to perform all the actions that you need. So that's exactly what we're doing here. We're injecting the user manager. Obviously, we're also injecting the logger. And then in the pipeline behavior itself, once again, the code is very simple. The only thing that we need to do here is, in this case, since we know exactly that we want to validate this register user comment, then we can simply cast this request as a registered user comment. And when we do this, we have these options to really have access to all the members of this registered user comment. And this allows us in turn to simply verify that this email does not exist. So we can simply have the user manager find by email async, and we use the comment or the email that we find in the comment. Now, obviously, if we find something or if the result is not null, it means that we already have such user in the database. So what we do in this case, we just log the result and we then just throw an application exception saying that email address already exists. And then we return this await next. In case if we don't have this exception, it means that validation was successful. So we can just pass the execution to the next pipeline behavior or to the request handler if there isn't any other pipeline behavior down the line. And just like this, we have cleaned up our register user comment by removing all this part of the code. Now, if we take a look at the next section here, what we see is that we have this database transaction. And also, if we take a deeper look at what we have here, is that this entire try catch block we have here to just catch the exception and roll back the transactions if we have an exception anywhere down the line. To refactor this and make it easier to read, I have also created this DB transaction behavior. However, for this DB transaction behavior to work properly and not to apply it to all the comments and the queries, basically because in queries we don't really have transactions, I have included or I have added this marker interface, which is iCommand of out tResponse, and it implements iRequest of tResponse. So this is the iRequest for MediatR. And this marker interface is useful because we'll look at it just in a few seconds to see how do we register these pipeline behaviors. But the idea here is that we know or we make sure that in this case, this behavior will be applied only when we have an iCommand. Now, coming back to the DB transaction, once again, we do exactly the same thing. We inject everything that we need, in this case, the appdb context and the logger, and then we move this entire try catch and transaction logic here in this one. So first of all, we create a transaction just like in the regular handler. By the way, this code is also copy pasted from the before version of this one. So we create a transaction and then we have this try block in which we have the result await next. So we await that everything finalizes correctly. Now, if we don't get an exception, it means we will continue the execution here. So in this case, we just want to commit the transaction and then return the result. However, if this await next anywhere down the line throws an exception, then we will execute or we will enter the execution, we'll enter this catch exception in which we'll log the error and we will roll back the transaction. And just like that, we have got rid of all the entire nesting of try and catches, and these or our DB transaction pipeline behavior will eventually also catch any other exceptions that might be thrown by the request handler or by other pipeline behaviors, and we will still apply this transaction rollback and we'll still log the exception and then rethrow it. If we take a look at what we do further, is that we need to create the identity and then we need to create the user profile. Now, these two operations are kind of like very simple, but they are very distinct. So what I have done in this register user command after refactoring is I have moved these two simple interactions in private methods. And here we have a private method for create identity async, and we have a method for create user profile async. So what we do in the handler in this case will be, as it should or it is intended, just an orchestrator of different things that need to happen once a certain request comes in. So we will create the identity, we will create user profile, and that's basically it. So just like this, we have refactored also this part of the code. So if we go back to our before section, we will see that the only thing that actually left us is actually this part. So this is where we use the email sender to send an email, and we'll use the SMS sender to send a thank you email. Now, the request sender, from my point of view, shouldn't be responsible or shouldn't know exactly that, okay, hey, I need to do these steps in this specific order. So how did I refactor this? In this case, I did take advantage of another very important feature that we have in MediatR, and it is these notifications. And we have this user profile created, which implements iNotification. This is from the MediatR library. And here I can specify that I want an identity user and I want user profile, and both of them should be required. So I can simply rely on them. And then for this notification, we have two separate handlers. Like we have the send email confirmation on user registration, which implements iNotification handler of the user profile created, which is the notification above. And here we implement the logic for sending an email. And exactly the same thing we do for the send SMS on user registration, which inherits the iNotification handler of user profile created, and in this case we just send the SMS. Notifications and notification handlers are in a certain way very similar to request handlers, but there is one very important difference. So for any given request, you can have only one request handler that handles it. But for notification, you can have one iNotification, but you can have several different iNotification handlers that would handle exactly the same notification. So if we go back to our register user comment, we see that how this translates is that we have injected the mediator, and the only thing that we do is we call this publish on the mediator and provide a new instance of this user profile created by providing the identity and the user profile, and obviously also the cancellation token because we already have it here. Now the good thing about using notifications is that, for instance, if tomorrow anybody comes and says, okay, we send an email, we send an SMS, but you know what, we also want to send a letter. Okay, no problem. Then we can come to this iNotification and we can implement a new iNotification handler for sending a regular letter. And in that case, in our handler, we wouldn't change anything. So just by adding a new notification handler, we will add another functionality, or we can extend the functionality, which from my point of view is very, very neat. Now, before we get further, let me also take a look at this program.cs. And here at the program.cs, the only thing that I would like to show you, obviously I have added all the needed services, is that here in this builder services add mediator, starting from mediator 12, this is how we add mediator to a project. And we have specified for the lifetime of the services that we add. This means that the request handlers and the notification handlers, they should be scoped. And then we have these register services from assembly, which would register request handlers and notification handlers. And then for the pipeline behaviors, we have added the pipeline behaviors for logging, and this is the first one in the line. And you can imagine this as being basically, or being decorators around the handler, similar to what we have in middleware. So this means that the order in which you do the registration actually matters, because it means that this is the first pipeline behaviors that will be invoked, and this is the second pipeline behavior that will be invoked. And since these are registered with open generic, so we don't specify any exact generic type arounds, they will be applied to really all queries and comments. And then we have this add behavior, in which we explicitly add our pipeline behavior for register user comment, and that returns a user profile. And now then this is covered, there is also another scenario, because as you've seen, we do throw a lot of exceptions. The thing is that this result object pattern is very popular, and to be honest, I also prefer the result object pattern myself. Now, when you use the result object pattern, the things that we have done here, or the way that we implement this refactoring, kind of like would need to change a little bit. Because the thing is that each pipeline behavior might throw exceptions. So instead of throwing exceptions, we will just need to add some errors to a certain error array or error list. And obviously this is not that easy, because we are in each pipeline behavior at a different place. To achieve this, I have set up some different things, and I would definitely really want to take a look at that. So first of all, if we go in application, we have this very basic result. This is a result of T with a bool is error, a payload for the T, and a list of errors if we have errors. Now, the thing is that we need to achieve that when we start the initial execution of this entire pipeline, is that we instantiate, or that we get an instance of this result object, and that we share that instance between all the different pipeline behaviors and notification handlers and request handlers. Now, this is not possible to do out of the box, but there is actually a very simple solution to do that. So what I have done here is I have created this mediator context class, which just inherits the dictionary of string and object. And I have gone to this program.cs and I have added as scoped this mediator context. So it's the same lifetime as all other services and pipeline behaviors and request handlers. Now, once we have this context, the thing is that what we need to do, we need a pipeline behavior that is the first one in line and that would instantiate a new instance of the result of T, and it will place it on our mediator context. Then we will inject the mediator context in all other pipeline behaviors and we will reuse that. So how does this look like? So here is the new pipeline behavior, and as the name implies, the scope or the goal for this pipeline behavior is to create a new instance of this result of t. Now, in order to do that, we need to infer and to see exactly what type exactly the response is. And we need to then create an instance of that specific type. As this will be applied to really all request handlers, no matter if commands or queries, it will be applied to all. We cannot know in advance exactly for which requests it will be applied. So this means that unfortunately we need to use a little bit of reflection and use this activator to create a new instance of our result object. And then the only thing that we need to do is we add this new instance of the result object to our dictionary with this key that we call result, and then we add this as an object. So previously we did throw exceptions, for instance, in this register user validation. Here what I have done is that obviously everything is exactly the same as previously. Now the only difference is that, for instance, if we find a user in the database with the exact same email address, instead of throwing an exception, what we do is we look in the dictionary in the mediator context for an entry with the key result. And if we find this entry with the key result, we need to cast it to a dynamic because it will be something different each time, because it is a result of t and the t will be different each time or for each request. So we use this dynamic, but on this dynamic we know that we have this response.errors.add. So we add the error, we set the isError to true, and then we need to return the response as a t response because this is what it is expected to return as a pipeline behavior. If we don't find on our mediator context an object with the key result, what we'll end up doing, we create a new instance of that specific object, add the errors, set it on true, and add it now to the context so that other subsequent pipeline behaviors might be able to reuse that. And then we return this result as response. And in the DB transaction behavior, where we also did throw some errors previously, in this catch we see that we do exactly the same thing. Obviously the first thing is we roll back the transaction, and once we got it out of the way, we do exactly the same thing. We check on the context if we have a result or an entry with a key result, and if yes, we cast it to a dynamic type. We know that it will have errors, and then we could add the message. We set the isError to true, and we return the response as t-response. And if we don't have one, exactly what we have done previously is we will instantiate, or we will create a new instance of this result and t-response, add the errors and add it to the context. Because afterwards it might be that our register user command will need to use these errors, maybe to return them or to peek in or sneak into our result object from the mediator context. And in fact, what we do here is basically similar to what we have done previously, but after we publish the notification, we do exactly the same thing. So we need to return the result, but we know that we already have or should have a result in our mediator context. So try get value result, and if we have this result, then we simply set the payload for it to be the user profile and just return it. If we don't have a result, then we just create a new instance of this result of user profile. So if we look at the program.cs, we'll see that here in this case we have registered this pipeline behavior, this result generation behavior, as an open behavior at the beginning of the entire pipeline behaviors. So that's mostly it. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to this channel if you are for the first time here. And if you have any question or just want to leave a comment, don't be shy and head over to the comment section and leave your comment, and I would be more than happy to get in touch with you. This being said, thank you very much for watching, and until the next time, I wish you the very best.